like this?
Yeah. And look at Inessa. Forget that I'm.
Oh, okay.
You'd be talking to me. Hi,
Yeah.
hi.
I don't do this very
Yeah,
often,
we're
so
good.
direct me.
Got everything going, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, the whole thing with children and music is such an important piece for Oregon Music Hall of Fame, and I'm just delighted to hear that you were a kid musician. So tell me how all that started for you, and what was your instrument?
So I grew up playing the saxophone. And had two jazz musicians that were the instructors at our school, two jazz trumpet players. So I grew up playing the sax and playing a lot of jazz, and just, I don't know, music was something that just spoke to me. Something that felt natural, something that I got a lot of enjoyment from. And was very fortunate to have a couple of instructors that, were very positive and, just really, I think, understood the impact, the positive impact that music was giving me. So,
Yeah, I hear students saying so often, and in fact our scholarship students have said too, that they give the nod to their teachers, which is, parents of course, but those teachers that nurture and every day teach the art. And it wasn't for you like, oh dang, I've got to practice. It sounds like it was love.
No, it was love. It really was. And it was, I've talked to other musicians because I always wanted to know if this was just my experience or not, but it just almost felt like another language, right? So the music just felt like another language, not just, the speaking part of it, but, the emotional connection that you can have to the music as well.
Yeah, and that takes, I think that you can connect to it so internally, and then to actually practice it to the point where you're very literate in that language. Fluent, I guess is the word, right?
Exactly. And, we hear about this all the time too, but, you're making me think about things that I haven't really thought about. But the discipline part of the practice as well, right? The understanding of the fact that, even if you're somebody like Esperanza Spalding that has a gift, you have to practice, right? You have to exercise that muscle, for lack of a better word. And as a young person especially, you create that discipline of practice, and it translates into other aspects of your life as well. So, I think that's why music education is so important for younger people, especially for kids, third, fourth, fifth, sixth graders, to get them exposed to the music, but also to help to instill that discipline and that immediate result that you see from the time put in practicing, right?
We had that conversation just a couple of months ago with Their Memory, and that it just goes right down that alley.
Yeah.
That you just have it nailed on the head. And then when you were growing up and thinking college, because you mentioned Corvallis and crazy road trips with your friends, was music still happening for you, or were you thinking, I've got to do something more practical?
Well, so I don't know, music for me has always, has always seemed to feel to be a part of me. And, there were some fortunate things for me that happened, I think, almost accidentally, right? One was, an interest in learning how to play an instrument. And then, having the good fortune of the instructors that we had to encourage that. But when I was growing up, my mom and dad had little neighborhood taverns and bars, too.
Oh, they ran little taverns and bars.
Just little neighborhood taverns and bars. And so I would always get the records from the jukebox. So when it was time to replace the 45s, I always got all of that great music. So growing up in the 70s and the 80s, was a lot of, that great kind of soul and R&B and just, all of that great music of that era. So not only was I playing the sax, but I was listening to all this great stuff, and that kind of helped to continue my kind of love of music as I was getting older. But I never really seriously thought about pursuing it as a career.
Yeah. But in a sense, I love how you've translated that love into something very serious. Even though you're not on your stage here at Jimmy Mac's, you're you're very, very important in facilitating that. And so we were talking before that you'd gone down to LA to work, in a serious businessman type thing. But what was it that precipitated coming to Portland and opening up Jimmy Mac's?
Yeah, so I don't know. Probably a lot of kids feel like they want to be like their dad, right? And I always always had a very close relationship with my dad, and I just always looked up to him, like I think a lot of boys do with their father, and enjoyed the business that he was in and saw how much fun he had with it, and just always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to in some way combine that passion for music that I had with a bar, restaurant type of a setting, and have my own jazz club or have my own blues club. And after doing the corporate thing for 11 years, I was fortunate to financially be able to give it a shot and see what happened. And so, almost 18 years ago, my wife and I opened up Jimmy Mac's, and, we told ourselves we're going to give it 1 year, and we're going to be all in, and we're not going to look back saying, I wish I would have worked harder, or I wish I would have tried harder. We're going to give it our all for a year and see what happens. And, thank God it worked out.
Yeah, I think it's. I've heard that too. That it's this commitment of being all in, because you have to make that in whatever you're seriously doing, whatever you're doing, right? Who was your very first act that you booked? Was that? Do you remember?
So the person that played our grand opening was Patrick Lamb. When he was just a little snotty-nosed kid, right?
Hey, he still is. I love you, Patrick.
and then God works in different ways in your life, right? So he played our grand opening 18 years ago, and then when we moved here to the new location,
Where were you before?
we were just right across the street. Yeah, so on the other side of 10th and Everett, and now we're over here on this corner. Couldn't have been an easier move. But when we moved here 8 years ago, it just happened to be his night to play the club, because we didn't know exactly when we were going to be able to open, right? So I was unfortunately canceling shows with various people because we just weren't open in time, and when we found out when we were going to open, it was his name on the marquee, and so he played our re-grand opening too.
That's fantastic. And this, I know that it's a whole business to be booking bands. Do you do it on your own, or do you have some help there?
So I've done it on my own for the first 17 years or so. And right now we've got a great partnership with the Portland Jazz Festival. So Don Lukoff and his folks at the Portland Jazz Festival bring in, during the course of the year, probably 15 or so shows. But outside of those shows, I still do all of the rest of the booking.
Yeah. So it's really got your stamp on it,
Well, I get a lot of feedback and a lot of help from a lot of people, JD and Lisa and my staff, and even other musicians, right? Because there's so many people here that are so well connected, that I'll always get recommendations and referrals. But ultimately, I want to be the one that makes the final decision, because it is what drives our business. We are a full-service restaurant, full-service bar, but people come here for the music, and we want to make sure that hits, because that kind of drives everything else.
Do you think that, talk a little bit about the Portland vibe of jazz and blues? When I think of Jimmy Mac's, I do think of a jazz club, but you've expanded and you're starting to reach out a little bit. Talk a little bit about those different musical genres and how you see them flourishing here.
So, Portland is such a fertile music town in so many different genres and in so many different ways, right? From the symphony to our jazz scene, to our blues scene, to our pop scene, right? You talk about bands like the Decemberists coming from Portland, right? You talk about Esperanza Spalding, a Grammy Award winner coming from Portland, from the jazz scene. You can talk about a variety of blues artists that are, Blues Music Award winners. Curtis Salgado last year, won Blues Male Artist of the Year, right? So for me, I don't want to take too much credit. I've got all of this huge pool of talent that lives here in the city. We just need to see if we can find dates that work for people, right? World-class musicians that live in this city. So it just makes my life easy. It makes things a lot easier.
Well, we're so glad you're here. So glad you're here. It's really good to see you again.
Just in time for the
I know.
fireworks to go off. That's awesome.
I thought I'd better